Hey, what is going on, everyone? Welcome to the Over the Cap podcast. It is December 23rd, 2023, and this is Jason Fitzgerald. You can find me on X at Jason underscore OTC, or you can email me, jason at overthecap.com, or you can check us out on YouTube, which I think is just Over the Cap. I got to check to see if that's what I have that channel at, but I think that's what we have that one at. I know I have my personal one too, and I kind of get mixed up between the two, but I think that's what we have that one at, which is primarily going to be the podcast, just in video format, if you want to follow along with some of the numbers that we kind of discussed during the podcast. Sometimes it's a little bit easier to do on the video side, and every now and then we'll put some other things up there with certain kind of contracts, or just some interesting stuff if I get a chance to do that. Not exactly the most set schedule, as you could guess, just based on the podcast schedule. It's been a little bit of time since I've been able to record one of these for you guys. Hopefully I'll be on a little bit more regular schedule right now. Last couple of weeks have just been a little bit busy. Some of it with just some stuff to do at home and some of the things with the kids and relatives and stuff coming over. But we also, I've picked up a couple different little projects here and there, football related kind of stuff that has kind of been on a little bit of a time crunch. So I've been finishing those up, and more stuff might pop up, I guess, when it comes to that. But I should get a little bit more free time, I think, with that kind of stuff kind of finishing up. And certainly that'll finish up first, second week of the new year. So, by that point in time, when everyone is really looking forward to free agency, we can kind of dive into some stuff there. As usual, I am joined by Nellie the Bunny. Nellie, anything? Nellie looks like she's asleep, so I don't think we have anything from Nellie at the moment. Beer of the week this week. I think the last time I was doing light stuff, so we're done with that. Maybe that'll come back again. We've got the Southern Tier 2 Xmas beer. If anyone wants to see this is their holiday seasonal that they have. This is probably my favorite of the holiday beers. Bought this a couple of years ago. Didn't think I was going to like it. I was like, I'll just try it out and see. And I loved it. And it's one of these, I look forward to it every year. The negative is it always seems to be in pretty limited supply. So it's not something that I can find a lot. So a lot of times it just kind of, I don't get it during the season. So whenever I see it, I'll usually pick it up. And that's what happened with this. I actually picked this up a couple of weeks ago. And I did have a couple, and then I found another 6-pack too. So I was able to get at least a little bit of it. But usually this one's in short supply. But I think this is a favorite of mine. There was one drink that I had last year at Epcot when we went down there for Christmas and New Year's that was really good too. I forget what that one exactly was. I don't remember if that was from... I actually can't remember which brewery that was from, but that was really good too. So anyway, so that's what we're going with tonight for this podcast. We'll see how long this podcast goes on for. Probably not too long. I don't think too many questions. I know I put it on Twitter. It was kind of a last second thing that I even decided to do it. I didn't really feel like watching the football games, so I know people are watching those tonight, and so that's going to take up most people's thoughts, I think, on this. So, since I'm sure some people don't make it to the end, I'll just wish everybody a happy holiday season, a Merry Christmas, and hopefully I'll do something next year before New Year's, but if not, we'll get a little Happy New Year's in there as well to everybody. So I think the first thing that I really wanted to look at here was just salary cap updates for 2024. So this was an article that I published just a couple of days ago. I think it was Friday, so just yesterday actually, where I started to tweet out numbers based on salary cap for next year, and the comments you get back from some of the stuff is weird. I should pop it up on Twitter and just see where people get upset when you mention the Saints. It's like, oh, you say this every year that they're in trouble. Well, every year they are in trouble. Everybody gets under the cap. It's not like nobody gets under it. We map out the ways for them to do it. It's just that you look at, if there's a bleakness scale, it's like they broke the bleakness scale this year. But anyway, people come up and like, well, why don't the numbers match the website? Other people will bring up things like, oh, this is where he's getting the numbers from. They don't match. It's like, it's my website. They're my numbers. They match. If you read the tweets themselves, or the posts, whatever they're called nowadays, if you look at it, what we're doing is we're taking the roster and we're bringing it to 51 players. Right now there's certain teams that have 38 players. There's certain teams that might have 48 players. It's not an even playing field. We have 51 players that count towards the salary cap. almost every single team in the league will get to 51 players within a week. Probably within about a week of the season ending. As soon as their season ends, typically what they do is they take all the players that are on the practice squad and they'll sign those players to what are called futures deals. And typically they're for the minimum salary. So for the sake of argument, what I do is I take every player and I bring them up to 51, and we just put in the minimum salary, which for next year is $795,000. So, those numbers are pretty big. They add up very quickly because the minimum salaries for players in the league just keeps going up and up and up and up. It's a lot different than before when you were looking at stuff that was probably about, $420,000 for the minimum salary. So, you factor those all in. Now, some teams don't get to 51. Like a team like the Saints this offseason won't. When the Falcons were at their worst, the Falcons didn't get to 51. The Falcons had to basically keep their roster low until the summer, when they could start to make some moves. They were able to keep that down. But it's all cap-related issues. But eventually you're going to get to 51. So when we do that, all we're doing is we're putting all the teams on kind of a level playing field. So that was really the first thing that we looked at here. And if you look at this table, that's really where we come up with what's called projected cap space for each team. So you see, I don't have these in order here. They're by overall cap potential, which I'll talk about in a minute. But you can see like the Commanders at 74 million, the Patriots at 70, the Titans at 75.6, and that's a different number than what you're going to see on the website. And, again, the reason for that is that 51 player thing. I can pull it up. Let me see if it'll open up easy enough, and I'll pull up the regular salary cap charts. 2024, you can see the Commanders have 81 million, only 42 players. So that's where we get our differential that drops from 81.7 million to, what did I say the Commanders were, 74.6. That's where we get that differential, and that's where those numbers come from and why those numbers are different with where we look at them. Now, I think I mentioned this in the last podcast that we dropped the numbers down to 242 million on the salary cap. I've been told by a lot of people that it was going to be way lower than my original expectations. I don't know how that could be. It means, to me, that looks like the NFL is really slowly bringing along the TV money. And maybe there's just some lingering COVID stuff that's still out there. And so what they're doing is they're preventing a spike. I read somewhere, was it Rappaport? I don't even remember who it was. They claimed the union didn't want a big spike because all the players would only get money. And that just doesn't even make sense. I don't even know who said it. If that's what the union said, that doesn't even make sense. If you get a big spike in the cap and you get players that make a bunch of money, I'll just throw a name out there. He's coming off injury, so it's not going to happen. But let's just say because the salary cap rose so much, someone gave Kirk Cousins $60 million to play football next year. Don't you think that even though the cap growth would slow down after that to say 20 million a year, 15 million a year instead of the 1 year jump at 30 million, that the next quarterback, whoever is up, Dak Prescott, would look at Kirk Cousins at 60 million and be like, I should be getting about 68, 70? Like, it helps everybody. It has nothing to do with the cap jumping and being like, oh, well, it's only this group of free agents that's going to be that's going to benefit from it. Like, if that really came from the union as a honest reason for what they're hoping for with the way the cap comes in and saying, well, we want those numbers to kind of be massaged so everybody, can kind of benefit equally over time. Like that's stupid. The biggest benefits that have ever come to the players, which is why the NFL changed this, and I know I'm getting way off topic here, but the biggest changes that ever came really were those couple of years in those early CBAs when it was still a little bit Wild West with the way that they were doing stuff and you were having to negotiate a new CBA every couple of years. It was in the year that the new CBA was negotiated, usually the salary cap jumped a lot. And the big one was the change from 2005 to 2006, if I remember right. If it wasn't 5 to 6, it was 6 to 7. But I think it was 2005 to 2006. It was because they changed the formula. the owners opted out of that deal so quickly because of that. But the big jump was that 1 year. After that, it was basically steady. We got steady increases after that of, at the time, maybe it was $7 million a year. But that 2005 to 2006 jump, and I'm too lazy to look it up, but let's say it was $15 million or $20 million, which was gigantic at that time. Just absolutely gigantic. And those players benefited from it, and so did everybody else. Because you couldn't negotiate contracts with the players where it was like, well, yeah, we paid these guys this. Well, that's because the salary cap grew so much. Now it's not really growing that much, so that market doesn't count. Like that's just nonsense. You want the cap to be as high as possible. And if it jumps all up in 1 year and then it levels out, so be it. The damage has already been done to the market, which impacts every single team. So anyway, back to this. The other comments that you get about the salary cap situations for all these teams, you get the comments about, oh, well, you're not including the fact that this guy is released and this guy is released. Look, I'm putting together a post on Twitter, all right, or on X, right? Or I'm putting together even just a post on the website. I'm not going to sit there and go through 32 teams and make my determinations as to what's going to happen. Now, Nick did something like that a little while ago where he started looking at some, likely players who are going to get cut. And there's different ways that we can and can't do that. But, you're just trying to paint the picture of this is where they're at. So let's see where you go from here. So what I wanted to do with this post that I put up on OTC and what I'll talk about here is flexibility the teams have. And you basically have two avenues for flexibility. There is a third, but the main two avenues are releasing players, restructuring contracts for cap relief. The other one is extensions. Mainly for where we're talking about extensions, that's getting into players that have void years on their contracts. Like Tom Brady, for example, the other year, when his contract voided out, it left Tampa Bay with like a $30 million cap charge. Had they extended him, they would have lowered that number significantly because they would have been adding a season on and they would have been deferring that dead money from accelerating, into the current league year. So, that's that one other avenue, but I didn't really want to touch that. That really only applies to a handful of players, handful of teams. And I think that's getting a little too deep in the weeds with it. So the first thing that I wanted to look at was what can you save by releasing players? So basically what I did is I went through every single team, calculated the dead money for those players, what it would cost, what that number was relative to their salary cap. And if the players saved at least $1 million in net cap space, meaning, remember, when we cut them, we got to keep our roster at 51. So if I cut this player and he saves $1 million, I say, okay, great, he saves $1 million. I got to replace him with someone that's making $795. So the net savings there, are very small. It's only like $200,000. So I would say, oh, all right, we're not going to count that guy. So $1 million in net savings is what we're looking at. And you can see the team that's going to have the most flexibility with cutting players is the Chargers. So if you're following along on YouTube, you can see it. If not, just take my word for it. If they have 9 players that have at least $1 million in savings, if they cut them, that would add up to about $102 million in salary cap savings. The Steelers are number 2. They're at 95.4. For the Steelers, this is mainly because they don't do paragraph 5 salary guarantees, so they don't have to worry about guarantees. They do big signing bonuses, obviously, but a lot of those are running towards the end because the Steelers hold on to some players for a pretty long time. So they do have flexibility to release. Denver has about $67 million they could create if they released everybody. That includes, that might not, does it include Wilson? Off the top of my head, I can't remember if that includes Wilson or not. I don't think so. I don't think they save anything with his release. So they could really turn their roster over if they wanted to. Seattle, that's another team that could turn the roster over. Now, in Denver's case, Denver's reason that they can turn the roster over is they kind of went on more of a spending spree a couple of years ago. And now they did some deals this year too, but those deals that predated Peyton are kind of running out on the guarantees. So at this point, you're just at the prorated money, and they do a pretty good job, I think, with the way they manage their cap and the way that they manage their contracts. You can argue about some of those guarantees and obviously the Wilson deal, but the way that they actually manage everything is actually pretty solid. Seattle, Seattle doesn't do future guarantees. People don't really pay attention to that. Seattle does injury-only guarantees beyond the first year, but they vest. And their vesting dates always come in February. So they don't have guaranteed salary to worry about. They just have, your prorated money to worry about. And they're not a team that really restructures too heavy. So they have about $60.8 million that they could save. Jacksonville, 57.5. Why is Jacksonville so high? Well, their spending spree was 2 years ago. Most players in the NFL, their guarantees will run for 2 years. So basically, all of the free agents they signed 2 years ago, they can filter out. When you look at it that way, and you look at a team like Jacksonville, this is one of the examples of why when you do get a rookie quarterback, if you want to, and all your stars align, and this really pertains to a team like Chicago this year if they do go and draft a quarterback. When you've got all this cap space, you can go in there and you can surround that rookie with players as good as you can find in free agency. You're going to be locked into those players for 2 years. They probably aren't going to give you a great benefit the first year if you have a rookie quarterback. All you're trying to do is kind of insulate that rookie from being in a situation like Carolina where, it's a 1 or a 2 win football team. So you're just trying to prevent that kind of negativity from creeping in. Now, I'm not saying that Carolina, the reason there is the team is bad, because the team itself, their defense really isn't awful. I think when you look at the players on the team, I don't think it's awful. I just think they took a weird path of how to, go anywhere with it. But, with Jacksonville, it's an example of how you can have a good group of free agents for his rookie year and his second year. And in the second year, you can actually compete. And then you kind of pick and choose after that second year which free agents you still want to hold on to, which ones you want to get rid of. And you're going to create a lot of cap room in getting rid of those players. And it gives you that second opportunity to go into free agency and kind of try to, fill all those holes as you're in the middle of kind of making a playoff run. Other teams that have the ability to cut some guys, the Colts, Patriots, that's just a numbers game. They have 14 guys they could cut. That's huge. Bills at 11. Bengals could have 9. These are all teams in the $40 million range. And then you get down to the teams with no flexibility. The Rams, 8.3. And why the Rams have no flexibility? Well, they've cut most of their guys. And the couple of guys that they didn't cut, well, they're uncuttable. The Saints, they only have 4 guys they could release with that kind of positive cap savings, would only save $9 million on the cap. So they're in a bad spot. Cowboys, 10.3. Similar spot, right? They have a lot of prorated money in those deals, a lot of guarantees in some of the contracts that were recently signed. You're not going to get rid of those players. Texans can only create 11.7. That probably has more to do with the state of their roster than anything else. They just, it's a lot of young guys that are on there, the veterans that are on there on short-term deals. So just not a lot of guys you can release. Buccaneers, kind of similar. So they're at 12.4. Eagles can only create 14.9. Then you have the Panthers can only create 16. Titans, 16. Giants, 17. These are teams with a lot of 1 and 2 year deals and players on expiring contracts if it's a 1 year deal. And if it's longer term deals, they're deals that were signed recently, and so you can't get rid of those players. So that's the first thing that we look at. Second thing that we look at is what's our restructure potential. So what I did with the restructures is I took every single player that had enough years in the league to be restructured, where again it would be meaningful. So if you were a drafted player, it was only for the class that would actually be on an option year in 2024, because those salaries are pretty high. You're not usually going to renegotiate a player's salary in the 4th year. It's really just the roster bonus that you're going to restructure at that point. And I think a lot of times the players, it almost just becomes like a kind of a pointless exercise to do that. If you're in a really bad position, maybe you would do it. But most of the time, it's just those option year ones. Other than that, we're looking at veterans. So I looked at 2 things. We reduce their salary to the minimum. We add enough void years in there to where we can prorate over 5 years. Okay? So we put everybody in the same position. This is the maximum you can create. Doesn't mean that teams are going to do that. There's some teams that are very against void years. We're saying, okay, let's add all the void years in that we possibly can to maximize what we can do to create cap room. Okay, so that's what we did with these players. Did the same with the roster bonuses. I didn't look at converting workout bonuses and per game bonuses. Majority of teams don't do that. Usually the numbers are so small, it really doesn't change much. So it was really those two spots that I looked at. Again, it was the same thing. If we had savings of 1 million, in this case, there's no net. It's just 1 million in savings. We included them. So here is where you get the Saints to have the ability to create a lot of cap room. They can save $127.9 million if they restructure 20 players on their roster. That doesn't mean they're going to have $128 million in cap space. I'll get to that one in a minute. But they can open up 128. The Dolphins can open up about 127. The 49ers can open up 111. The Broncos, 106. So the Broncos, to me, are a team that's going to have to decide, do we cut or do we restructure? You're probably not even going to do a combination. I think with this team, it's a very strict one way or the other, for what you're going to do. Pittsburgh, a lot of flexibility here. They could open up 106. I'm not sure if they'll really do much anything. They're kind of in a weird spot, I think, right now. They like to hold on to their guys. They do restructure, but they're not going to go into free agency and sign a bunch of players. Bills could open up 103. They're going to have a lot of decisions to make. Chargers. So here's another team. It's going to be, which path do you go? Do you cut or do you keep and restructure? You can create up to 103 million through restructures. Now, this overlaps a lot of their guys that you could cut that give you all those cap savings. So, they have to make that decision. Which route are they going to go? Dallas, they can open up $90.7 million. So, you go through these teams, and then you go to the teams that don't have a lot of flexibility. The Eagles, they can only open up about 30. Why are the Eagles so low on this list? The reason the Eagles are so low is because the Eagles have done their restructures already. The Eagles basically put option bonuses in every player's contracts, so their salaries are already there, down at the minimum. With those bonuses built in. The Eagles can opt out of that, but for our purposes, we put them in there. The Patriots only have 9 players at about 38 million. Titans 5 players, 45. Texans 9 players, 47. This gets back to what we talked about before. Not a lot of players to cut, not a lot of players to restructure. It's just the status of their rosters as they're kind of rebuilding franchises. Washington at 53 because they don't really have that infrastructure of players that are there. So when you come down to the last table, if you're watching on YouTube or if you just want to go to the website and you just check out the article there, I'm sure before the games tomorrow, if I have time, I'm not exactly sure what my morning schedule is looking like, but if I have time, I'll probably post, I'll definitely post a link to the article again, but I'll put some of these things in format on Twitter. But what I did is I looked at the 3 scenarios for the teams. So here we have at the top the Colts. The projected cap space as is 66.1 million. Oh, and I forgot to mention before, that does include the estimated carryover at the moment. People were asking about that. It does include it. If they cut all those players that we mentioned, they would have about 119.8 million in cap room. If they didn't cut anybody, but they did all the restructures that were listed up there, they would have 132.5 million in cap room. So I call their overall cap potential, which is just kind of like if I was to look at them and say, okay, on average, we would expect them to make some moves. I would look at this team and say, okay, they could probably have $106.1 million in cap room this year. Like that might make some logical sense to treat them like that. Washington would be number 2 at just under 100 million. The Patriots are just under 100 million, just a little bit behind Washington. The Titans would be at 96 million. The Bears at 95 million. Bengals at 91. Steelers 87. Cardinals 83. Texans 83. Then you get down on the low end. And, for these teams, like the Saints, so the Saints are 93.6 million projected over the cap when we get to a 51-man roster. We mentioned there's nothing to save by cuts. They would still be 84 million over the salary cap. So the next thing that we look at is all those restructures. You got to restructure everybody on your roster. So you're running everybody back on a team that's probably a losing team. To open up $120 million or so in cap room. That's what you're deferring to the future, right? All that money you save goes to the future. you're only going to be at about $34.3 million in cap room. So, I looked at that and said, okay, well, average scenario on this is I'm just going to look at that one category. Let's call it like 40% of that or something. So I looked at their position as, on average, I'd look at them as a team that has like $14 million in cap room to use. Maybe you could have a little more, maybe a little less, but, that's where you would be. And, this is why I saw Florio put out he's put out a lot of things recently that are just real speculative. But, would they get rid of Derek Carr, to avoid a $10 million guarantee kicking in 2025 and some other things? You look at Derek Carr's contract, I just don't think it's possible. They lose $17 million in cap room, and you couldn't trade him until after the season begins. They need him as part of these restructures to get to 34, in there. So I actually don't know if there's a scenario by which they could carry him at his full cap hit just to trade him, or carry him at his full cap hit and then cut him. Like, I don't think they could do that. I guess what you would have to do, since you guaranteed him the money anyway, I guess you would pay out his salary next year as a bonus now, like in week 17, week 18, and then you could June 1 him the next year. That would probably work. That's the only way I think they could do that. Anyway, I had the Bills as the second worst at 27-7. They're going to have a lot of real interesting decisions to make. I think the Bills have run these things wrong the last couple of years, really the last 2 years. But they're still fighting, and they're a better team than the record says, so maybe they'll get somewhere. Dallas at about 29. They don't really have a lot of flexibility here. Dolphins 30. Now, I think the Dolphins will come in over this. I think when you look at this chart and you say, well, the Dolphins with all these restructures could get to 75. I think the Dolphins will try to get to 75. And I think the Dolphins are going to put everything into next year. The Eagles at 36. Packers at 36, Ravens at 38 million, Browns at 42. Browns fall into the same category as the Eagles. They've already kind of pre-done most of their stuff. And then you have the Jets could get to about 45. And the Chargers I have at 50. So the Chargers is very different than their position right now, which is about 53 over, because they do have so much flexibility that I would look at them, even though that number on a piece of paper is really bad, and say, all right, this is probably somewhere in the ballpark of like the 10th worst cap position in the league. It's not really the second worst. It's probably somewhere about the 10th. So that's what we have as we kind of look towards next year. As we look into cap room that teams have, and the kind of moves that they may have to make with their rosters to be able to function, in the offseason, and sign players trying to improve. And sorry about the noises here. This chair is on its last leg. So I did get a new chair. I keep meaning to put it together. I'm afraid Jacob will ruin the chair. So I'm just trying to finish out on this one that's pretty messed up, and it's pretty squeaky right now. So sorry about that coming in the background here. So maybe I can try to sit still a little bit more, and that'll prevent that from happening. Maybe. Anyway, that's just the state of that. So, the one thing that I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit was just kind of looking at free agency for next year. But looking at these numbers, I think one of the things that I wanted to just go over very briefly here are just some of the jobs that might be open next year. And I think the main ones that we look at as probably being open next year, as we go up and down this list, I think you've got the Chargers, obviously, they just fired their coach. And so the Chargers are an interesting job. The Chargers basically have a player, and that's about it. Like, they don't have a lot of young guys who are like ready to come in and contribute. They've maybe made a couple too many trades. They've definitely put too much into this roster financially. They've put in way too much into this specific season. And, it's a job where you're probably going to have to go in there and, the normal path would really be to tear that team down and try to build something around Herbert, who's now on a veteran contract. Your proper path is to probably find a way to trade Mac, trade Joey Bosa, probably trade Keenan Allen. But then you've also got to manage, Herbert at that point because, while there has not been any indications, I think that he's, would be upset with anything or anything else. You can see the criticism already starting to come down on him that he's not a winner. He doesn't carry him to the playoffs. He doesn't really belong in the category with these other guys because, he's not good enough. Who cares if he throws a pretty pass every now and then? He's not leading them anywhere. And, if you start tearing things down, you might get to a situation where your only talent you really have on that team wants a trade. So it's a real interesting job. I would look at it as a pretty poor one because of that. I look at this as like I have to rebuild around a guy who's going to get a ton of criticism because we're going to lose next year and maybe even the year after that. And he might get upset. If I trade Keenan Allen away or I have to cut Keenan Allen for salary cap purposes, Keenan Allen's great. He's terrific. He's probably not going to play 17 games. And at some point, you've got to find a way to develop younger guys to be there. I'm going to cut Mike Williams. Maybe you bring him back on a big major pay cut because he's coming off an injury, but that contract ended up being a disaster for you. So, I just don't see like a real bright light there. And the other thing that's a real negative is I think while some people are starting to blame Herbert there, a lot of blame obviously goes on the coach. And when you get to the point where people start saying that the reason that they're losing is because of the coach, the expectation is, well, if we change coaches, we will win, right? Or if we change general managers, we will win. This is exactly what happened in Minnesota. Minnesota was very much in a position where they needed to reboot or whatever. And Minnesota's not bad, but Minnesota has basically stayed the course. And I know they made the playoffs last year and everything else, but they basically stayed the course of being okay. And I am sure that general manager went into that with the expectation originally, or maybe a thought like, well, if it was up to me, I'd probably want to restart this whole thing. And start this process of, moving on from certain guys and building around, a couple of these young players we have and everything else. But the expectation is that the coach and to some extent the general manager screwed things up. And that's why you weren't getting, to that consistent 10-win level, 11-win level. And you end up having to change what you think might be the best long-term course of action to maybe please your ownership in the short term. And I think the Chargers could be in that situation where, it's almost like you're going to be tasked with win now. And it's like, man, I've got these guys in their 30s with salary cap hits of like $35 million. I've got pass rusher who can't stay healthy. I've got wide receiver that doesn't stay healthy. I've got another wide receiver, who might be breaking down. I've got a running back who can't run anymore. We can't block. Like, I don't know what you're going to look at with that team and say like, oh yeah, this is a real positive scenario. So, maybe if Bill Belichick goes from New England, maybe this is the kind of team Belichick can come to because maybe he can, wave that magic Belichick rings, wand, whatever you want to call it, and, attract some veteran players because that Belichick, from a system perspective, can very quickly get you a functional defense. They'll get you a good defense, and he'll do it on the cheap. So he'll do it within your salary cap constraints you have. And he'll have the quarterback there. He's just got to find a couple of guys that you can buy in on wide receiver. I don't know with Belichick. The other thing is like, you don't want to give him GM responsibilities. They've been bad in New England the last couple of years. So, you really don't want to give him that. So I wouldn't call it a good job opening at all. I think it has potential to be a disastrous job opening. Let me just move up my chart here. We got the Panthers. This is only a good job opening if you are very high on the quarterback and you think somehow that, Frank Reich was just not into doing the job. That, he took the job but really didn't want to do it. Like he took it to take a job. That's the only way that you would look at this as a positive. This is a team that doesn't have draft picks, right? You've traded away your number one this year to Chicago. You've traded away your second round pick to Chicago next year. You don't have a great cap situation. Now, you're out of the disaster salary cap hole, but you're not in a great cap situation. You're like where Houston's been the last couple of years. Like you've got yourself probably $30 million, $40 million. I have them here at 60 if they really went all crazy with the restructures and stuff like that. Let's say they get to $50 million in cap room. They have a ton of free agents. They got older this year rather than younger. That was probably a coaching decision kind of thing. So, that's a pretty bleak one too. You're not going to be able to attract free agents. You're not going to be able to go after probably a lot of free agents. You're just going to be piecing your roster together. And if the quarterback stinks, year 3, you're basically going to be like the Jets, just chasing. So, I don't think that's a good one either. Unless you really like the quarterback. You've got Atlanta. Atlanta might open up. Atlanta, it's just they've done a poor job, I think, with the way they've approached the draft. They've done a poor job with having the quarterback. I think the coach needs a somewhat functional quarterback there. The way Detroit has a Jared Goff, he needs his version of Jared Goff to have a chance to be successful. I don't know if they're going to move on from him or not. It's an interesting job opening if it opens up. They do have some talented guys. I think the bloom is off on a couple of them, but they do have some talented players. They have good ownership, owners willing to spend. That won't be an intriguing job, I think, if it opened. You've got the Raiders. The Raiders, it's a team that has really no building blocks. I don't consider Max Crosby, who's arguably the best defensive player in the league, I don't really consider that a building block. That's not really what you kind of build around. They don't have it's not like they have a great unit and he's making it, that much better. And it's, he's just a really good player on a bad football team. The Raiders, you've got a lot of salary cap space. You have an owner who's cheap. That's a negative, but you do have a lot of salary cap space. Your draft is maybe okay, but it's not a position to get a quarterback. You don't have a quarterback. You got too many old football players. You're going to see what you can get for Devontae Adams. You'll move on from some other guys. They've cycled through coaches very quickly there. That's not a good one either. And they may just have Pierce and all those guys. They may just promote them and have them stick around. Steelers, they are what they are. I don't know if Tomlin will go. He's a good coach. I don't know if he's right for Pittsburgh right now. I think the league has passed him by. I think similar to Belichick, I think if you put him in the right situation, he's going to win. And to be honest, getting to 9 wins with a team like Pittsburgh this year is almost like a miracle. But I don't think that I don't think he's in a position where he's ever going to take a team to like that next step. Unless they have that kind of infrastructure in place. Now they might have that with the Chargers as well. I think the thing with the Chargers is that, if you had the team this year, or the team probably more the team they had last year, a coach like Tomlin probably would have gotten pretty far with them. He's not going to have those stupid games that they completely blow, where they do something dumb and then it comes back to bite them. He's not going to do that. Like, you're going to be favored, you're going to win. Is he going to upset the teams? Maybe not. But, you're favored to win, you're probably going to win. And at least at a regular season level, you're going to get pretty far. You're going to get past a wild card game. Might even get past a divisional game. Anything can happen. Right? And if you bring in the right talent, that's going to get you to the next level. I don't know if he can kind of do the stuff on defense that Bill can. Because in Belichick's case, Belichick can do it with like a mercenary team, a team of cheap mercenaries. Tomlin is more like a developmental, right? He been in Pittsburgh where the players are there for you draft a guy, he's going to be there for probably 4 years. You sign a guy as a free agent. I know they're not a big free agent team, but you sign him to a contract for 3 years, he's probably going to be there 2 or 3. So he has time to kind of mold a team, to bring a team together. Does a pretty good job managing all the different personalities and stuff. And I know there's been some ups and downs with Pickens there. But I think that'll be interesting. In terms of a job, it's a great job because you got a lot of stability. Pittsburgh's not going to turn around and fire you in 2 years. But, you're replacing someone who should be considered like a legendary coach. He's had a great run that's there. They always win. And that might change when you bring in someone new. You bring in someone new there, they're going to have the potential to do better. They're also going to have a much higher potential to probably be significantly worse. Chicago, I don't know if that one's going to open up. That's a good job opening if it does, but they have to make a decision at that quarterback thing, and I think they'd be insane to keep Justin Fields over draft pick. I would not be against keeping Justin Fields and a draft pick. You control Justin Fields' rights. Will he be upset? Sure, but he's got an option year. He's got his next year, right? It's his 4th year. Then he's got an option. Then you can do 2 tags. So you still have time to see if he can be the solution. There's nothing I think you learned this year that you didn't know last year about him as a football player. Maybe there's some other things that the coaching staff or the front office saw that they like more about him, after he was another year in the system. But just in terms of football stuff, I don't really see a difference. Titans, I don't know what they'll do. I don't think Vrabel and Rand are really, on the same wavelength. To me, Vrabel belongs probably as the coach of New England. And Carthon probably wants to bring in someone, just different style. I think you're looking to bring in something more like what you would see in San Francisco. So that'll be interesting. Patriots, you're replacing Belichick. You've got no quarterback. You're going to draft a quarterback. You got a ton of cap room. You got what's been very cheap ownership, unless you want to blame it on Bill. They basically have spent once in the last couple of years. I don't know how much that's going to change. To me, that's a big hill to climb. I think New England has to be... It's got to be an inside job. I think the only way you survive that job at all is if you're like a former player, who's been there. Whether that's Vrabel, Mayo, whomever, that is. I think that's the kind of coach that has to come in there because New England's a project. Now, if they can get that quarterback with the number 2 pick, assuming they pick number 2, you've got sky's the limit potential, right? Because you got that young quarterback and you can go that same Bears route in terms of, all the salary cap space you have, or with the Jaguars, that I mentioned before. You do have that, but you've got nothing in place. Like, you look at that roster, it's not good. And, even if you want to say that they have a good defense, which they do, I think a lot of that disappears if you take Belichick out of the equation. That's probably another reason why you want to promote from within, to where you're maintaining same system and everything else. Washington, who knows? You don't know what you're going to get with ownership there. They're not in a great position with anything. Draft wise, they're probably. I don't know if they're going to pick high enough to get a quarterback. They need a quarterback. They probably need receivers. Need an offensive line. You need a defense. I mean, their defense. You can't imagine how bad that defense is. In those numbers I think Washington allows teams to typically score about 45% more than they typically do. So it's going to be a test with the Jets, all right, to see what breaks here. But, basically teams are just really loading up. Like your fantasy, you should be playing against, you're playing guys against Washington, because teams are just far exceeding any kind of average expectation. The next worst team allows teams to score about 23% more. So that shows you how bad Washington has been, with pretty much everything. So, those are the jobs that are going to open up here. So, the next thing I think I want to look at here, let me pull this up. I pulled these here. So this is going over just a little bit of a preview for free agency next year, where basically what I wanted to do is take a look at our valuations that we have for the players. So this is just a main list this is all the free agents for next year. I'm sorry, I have this filtered to edge players. Let me just pull up all the positions. I have these sorted from lowest to highest on the value. So the OTC valuation is not a free agent valuation. Always tried to say that it's not. It's an attempt to basically look at all the contracts that are in the league. This was during a period of time, all right? And I've adjusted through the years to kind of try to make it fit where the markets go. But basically it's set up to say, okay, this is where all the contracts are within the market. We've got all these players that earn money that don't do a thing, so that kind of gets factored in there as well. What if we took all of the money that's in there at these various positions, and we basically said, okay, this is what the players would be worth if it was just an open bidding system for the players, but it's an open bidding system, but we can't really change significantly our overall way that we spend. Now, the numbers, in a sense, they come out higher on a team-wide perspective, because we're giving a lot of players credit for not playing. And you're getting a lot of guys in the middle that are getting way higher values than they would typically get if they were free agents, because the NFL really overvalues a lot of those top guys. So, this is just a way that we take what players are doing statistically, what they're doing through a grading process that comes from Pro Football Focus, and how much they're playing, what the teams are trusting them with to play. And we say, okay, within this market, this is probably what the value of that player should be on an annual basis. And again, like I said, it doesn't mean anything for free agency. Most of the time I would say that it's going to lowball you, specifically at quarterback it does. But, it gives some context, I think, as to teams that are playing well, teams that aren't playing well. Troy put a graph up the other day. Let me see if I can find it. Let's see. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, wait. I'm looking up. Yeah, look up Texans cap. I know I reposted it, so it's actually probably on my timeline. Let me see how much stuff he's got up there. I can dig it up really quick. Basically, he put a chart together that was plotting some of the numbers we had, against EPA numbers. Let's see. As I try to dig it up here. I've done this with records. There's, they work out relatively well with it. I think this is it. So I'll just pull up here. This is, what is this one here? Okay, so this is defensive players and the team's defensive EPA, I believe. So, if you see it, you can see it's a pretty reasonable cluster around there, with the productivity that you have on here. And the other one that he has was offense. This one is probably a little bit more in line with what you see with EPA. Now, I think the reason for this, my guess, because I know I've done studies before on records, I've done studies before on correlation with EPA, and just some other different kind of statistics. And I think what it boils down to is the quarterback just plays a massive role in what the offense can and can't do. And a lot of your value that's coming through evaluation on offense specifically is really going to be driven by the quarterback. So I think if you have that, the numbers should be reasonable. And I think, Troy's got a line that runs through here, if you want to see the graph. And, some of these teams, like Arizona, for example, I have a feeling that Dobbs' numbers there, you don't get included in Arizona because I've moved him to Minnesota. So Minnesota's number on the value would actually come down for quarterback. Arizona's would come up. And those are two of the bigger, kind of outliers, I think, that are there. There's a couple others too. But, I think when you look at it, that's what you get. With the defense is going to be a little bit more random because I think with the defense you get into, what positions bring value to the overall play of the defense. And I think that's one of the difficult things, right? That the defense is not really relying on one person. This is why I get into that, when I mentioned about Crosby with the Raiders and say, it's not really a building block because it's like one guy. And it's not like he's, 22 years old, like a Micah Parsons or something. He's a couple years in the league. It's not like he's gotten, it's not like he's old. But you look at a lot of the guys, I think defensively, and what you have are defenses, I think, really get exposed by weak links. I don't think offenses get exposed as much by weak links unless the weak link is the quarterback. There may be some situations where they do. Like if you have like a terrible group of wide receivers, that's going to hurt you, right? If you have, a team that's just four Kadarius Tonys, that's probably going to be a problem. Despite how good your quarterback might be. So I think you do have that comes into play, maybe on offense, but on defense, it's weak link kind of stuff. It's like last week. Now, the Jets have a great secondary. All right, I'm not complaining about the Jets secondary, but just to bring up a play, that existed in there where, you basically had Jalen Waddle go off in that game. And Sauce Gardner, I don't even think got targeted. But DJ Reed got brutalized by Jalen Waddle, right? He basically was behind him by like 3 steps on that big touchdown. I'm assuming he gave up some of the other passing plays to him, but if not, it doesn't matter. Somebody else did. And the point on that is that Miami was able to move the ball with ease. Why? Because even though you have a great player in Sauce Gardner, you had weak links everywhere else on that defense. And you could get a lot of value from individual players. Let's say you had a team that has a Sauce Gardner type corner and at the same time has a Aaron Donald type pass rusher, something like that. Still, they're only going to impact so many plays. Like Sauce Gardner is going to impact the 6 or 7 plays you normally would target that wide receiver on. Now that's a lot. That's an important part of the game. But it's probably like 6 plays. And, because you typically spread the ball around anyway. So, you just have to spread around a little bit more because you're playing against Sauce Gardner. And some of that times too, you can move away from him because of the style defense Jets play. You can move the guy to the other side of the field. He's probably not traveling with him. Blah, 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 blah. All that kind of stuff. And, your Aaron Donald, he's gonna get a lot of pressures, right? But you're not going to pressure the quarterback every single play. And even when you do pressure the quarterback, he's still probably going to complete 30 or 40% of those passes. So it's way down from where it would be normally. But you still occasionally you're going to get some positive plays on those pressures. And the other plays, it's just like, well, you're relying on other guys. And if you don't have other guys that can do that, you may have these couple of players who, are high up there. And you may have players that maybe are highly ranked that don't really play important positions, like a linebacker or something like that. So they boost the value of your team. But the defensive performance sometimes isn't going to match that, I think, as much because, again, I think it's a weak link system. And when teams target those weak links, they exploit you. And sometimes they can, kind of beat up on you, even though you have good individual players on a defense. So I think that's just one of the reasons why, I think I mentioned that a little bit when you look at these things. But anyway, back to these charts here. Let me just pull that up. So I just wanted to get a look at this, and people have been asking a lot. Well, what are the positions of strength in free agency? And this at least gives us, I think, a good idea, with the exception of you have some players that are low here. I'd have to look through to see who who have been hurt. That might be good players. You'll see someone here. No one's jumping off the page at me here, but you might see somebody who's like a name player that's just been hurt all year, and because of that, his value is like 800,000. Like if Aaron Rodgers was a free agent, for example, Aaron Rodgers' value on OTC is probably like 1.3 million. That's like the value of a couple of snaps basically at quarterback. The fact that he played is worth $1 million or $800,000. Obviously, he would be worth a ton more than that as a free agent. So, there are some players that are going to fall through the cracks because they've been hurt. But again, I think this will give you a pretty decent idea as to what might be the good positions and what might not be the good positions. So let's talk about that a little bit, and then we'll get into the couple of questions that I think we got. Okay, so I think what I wanted to look at here first is going through each position. And what I did was I calculated the average that we had for the top 5 players, top 6 through 10, 11 through 15, and 16 through 20. So if we look at the values, the average for the edge is 22.7 million. So that's a pretty good group of players, or at least it's very top heavy with one or two guys. Quarterback 19.4, which is, it's actually probably for free agents on the high end for quarterbacks, but when you think of where quarterbacks are, I'm not pegging these to where the average of like the market would be. That's not great, right? Because our average for a higher level quarterback is probably a starting point of like $40 million. So, we're at half of that, whereas our edge rushers more or less are around 30 million. So 22 to 30, that's pretty good. Corner, our top market's at 20. We have our average top 5 at 14.8. Pretty solid. Interior D-line 14.7. Wide receivers 14.4. Safeties 12.4. That's pretty good compared to where the market is, and that's typical for safeties. Now, safety, this is a position where the valuation probably actually overshoots the market because there's so many safeties. Guys typically don't get paid that should. So you get a lot of value, I think, in those positions. Sorry, my camera's giving me some issues here. Let's see if we can fix that. Yeah, good enough. Linebacker 11.3. Left tackle 8.9. That's pretty bad. Guard 7.8. That's not good. Running back 7.7. That's actually fine for the position. Right tackle 6.8. That's terrible. Tight end 6.5 is what it is. Center 5.5. Centers aren't a thing. So my first inclination when looking at this is if I need offensive line help, my sad Jets, not a good year from the looks of it. You might be looking trade market more than anything else. But there's other positions where you can probably improve. But that's going to be a little bit trickier. This might be one, and we'll get into the individual players in a minute. These might be positions where you are kind of pigeonholed into one person. you just are going to focus on one guy and you're going to have to get that player signed and, figure out how to do it, or you're going to have to go trade market, and trades are getting to be more and more plentiful in the NFL, which is great. It makes it more exciting. Players 6 through 10, edges at 12, interior D-line at 9.8, linebacker at 8.3, wide receiver 7.4, corner 6.8, safety 5.9, running back 5.1. So you can see a big drop here, but I thought what was interesting was I thought I would do a drop ranking. So this is what the value drops from saying, okay, I want one of these top players versus I'll wait maybe for that second wave of players. So linebacker to me is a position like, why would I pay up on it? It's a 27% drop in what we have as value for it. We know, especially on defense, now linebacker is probably a little steadier than some of the other positions, but we do know that there's a lot of fluctuation that goes on with defensive players. So to me, 27% drop means that there's not a huge drop in talent that's available, whether I'm looking at the top of the tippy top of the market or maybe a second level. Interior D-line kind of falls in that same category. We dropped from a 14.7 to a 10 million. That's a 33% drop. I don't really care about running backs. Tight end, 35% drop. Right tackle's low to begin with. So basically what we're saying is they're all backup players. They're probably backup guys anyway. But edge, like that's a major drop. We dropped 47% of the value going from 22 to 12. So you're going from a couple of starting quality players to more situational guys. Now some of those guys might be pretty good. Huff is probably in that range. Because Huff's numbers are dinged significantly for something like this because he doesn't play a lot. Off the top of my head, I don't know how PFF grades him. I know his pressure numbers are going to be pretty good, so from a statistical standpoint, he probably should be okay. Because he's really productive, even though he doesn't play a whole bunch. But, as a aggregate, look, it's probably going to be down a little. Quarterback falls off a map. They dropped down about 90%. Left tackle, 70%. They were really going nowhere. And corner, drops like 55%. So, that to me is a top-heavy market. Same goes for safety, which drops down to 6 million. 52% drop. So it's those are a little bit more top-heavy positions. We look at positions ranked 11 through 15. Edge at 6'6", interior D-line at 5'8", linebacker 5'7", safety 5'2". This all falls in line with the concept of you can build your defense via free agency, that you can always find depth on defense and free agency, not necessarily on offense. So on offense, wide receivers ranked 5th at 5 million average, corner 3.9. So it just tells me corner is just not a deep position this year. Guard, tight end, running back, quarterback, left tackle, right tackle, center. As we drop down, and then finally we get to positions 16 through 20. I have linebacker at number 1, edge at number 2. That's pure situational guys. When we're talking an edge at $4 million, that's a fill in the gaps kind of guy. Nothing wrong with that. Just that's the type of player that is. Interior D line, $4 million again. That's your situational run stuffer probably type player. Safety at 3.6 is so. Wide receiver at 3.5 is like a fourth. Wide receiver on a team, a corner at 3.4. I mean, you're getting deep into your packages. Where if that's where your value would be on that player, it's pretty far down. And again, we can look at those drops that go there. From 11 to 15 to 16 through 20. Corner is kind of the same. So corner's big drop is really from your top 5 to 6 through 10. Then you have another big drop, 6, 10 to 11, 15. But 11 to 15, 16, 20, it's basically the same kind of players. Running back doesn't have as steep of a drop. Tight end doesn't. Linebacker doesn't. Guards don't. Centers have a massive drop off. But there's not a lot of centers. So, I mean, that's a reason why. Quarterbacks, your tackles. So, that's just looking at that. Now, what I wanted to look at were, your individual positions. What did I do here? A little chart that's up. Let me filter by positions here. So, I mentioned in there edge as being a good one. So let's pull up your edge players here. Pull them up on a chart. So you can see your number one player, if you're following along here, is Josh Allen. We have him at 33 million or so. He's top line pass rusher. He's going to get franchise tag, so he's not really going to be available. Danielle Hunter, that's going to be an interesting one. So his value is at 28. He's probably not going to cost that because he's older. And there's going to be a lot of question marks to come with him, but just a highly productive player. So to me, that's a real interesting name. I think it's Van Ginkel should be here. I don't know if we've got all our players here. I feel like we're missing a name. Let me see. Who am I missing here? Something seems off on my little thing here. Something's off on where the names are on the charts. Oh, I must have dropped them under. So it's Van Ginkel is number 3. Greenard is number 4. Chase Young is number 5. Brian Burns is number 6. Now, Burns is obviously going to go for a lot more money. He's probably going to get tagged. They made a massive mistake. They're not moving him. Now, he hasn't had a great season. That whole team hasn't had a great season. But he's a good young player. So him and Chase Young are both real interesting. This is where now, if you want to look, you can see Bryce Huff here at the $9 million range. If Bryce Huff played 70% of the snaps, he'd be at like 25 or 26. But he doesn't. He plays like 35% of the snaps for the team. You got some veterans that are okay. Zadarius Smith, Leonard Floyd, Bud Dupree. Those are name kind of guys. So, you look at it very top heavy. So Allen probably tagged. These other guys aren't big names, but they've been relatively productive this year. So, that might be players that you can get decent value on because they may come in at these kind of valuations or lower. And, if they can repeat, and that's always hard. We always talk about like we buy into like outlier seasons. That's a bad thing to do. But it just gives you an idea sometimes of what can or can't happen. Quarterback. Let's take a look at quarterback next. I gotta imagine this is driven a lot by Mayfield. Yeah. So we have Mayfield at about 32. Which is actually pretty good because for the most part, because of the way the quarterback position varies on here, our seasonal totals for quarterbacks, now this year the play is down a little bit, but even in a normal year on a seasonal basis, you're not going to get players coming in at 55 million. And the reason for that is it's just a weird market because you've got a bunch of guys who get paid nothing but give you a lot of production. So if we really balanced everything out, it's very hard for somebody to really be worth 50 million and keep the market kind of in any kind of uniformity to the real world. So those numbers get dinged down simply because your rookie starting quarterback just by starting should be worth like 20-25 million. So that it just screws up everything. It's hard to come up with a way to make that, in my mind at least, kind of make sense within the market. I think it's a flawed market, and that impacts the way that we kind of calculate these things. So you've got here Mayfield. Number 2 would be Dobbs. Obviously, he's not getting anywhere near that. He's on the bench now, and he's been all over the place. Gardner Minshew, that's a participation trophy. I shouldn't say that. He's better than that. But he's at 20 million. Now he hasn't started all the games because, the rookie was there for a bunch of the games too. But basically that's like your average fill-in kind of quarterback number that you would expect. Kirk Cousins, this is injury related at 15. Ryan Tannehill, is at 5.5. Joey Flacco, he's there at 3.5. Not too bad considering he's hardly played. But you can see it's very top heavy, and really it's just Mayfield, and that'll be an interesting, interesting one to see what Tampa Bay does there. I would guess they would tag him. I'm pretty sure they can. So that'll be an interesting one. Corner, I think that was another position that looked good, right? So at corner, we got Jalen Johnson, Kenny Moore, Jarius Sneed, Steven Nelson. That's older player. Kendall Fuller. Witherspoon. This is where you get your drop now. You got Witherspoon, Gilmore, Miles Bryant, Nixon. And again, this is like where you get into, okay, you've got a couple of these guys at the top that can start. Johnson's going to be the big one this year. If the Bears don't tag him, I think they would. And then you just kind of get into the, okay, do we want to bring in like some veteran guys that we know can fill in the gaps? Do we want to bring in some guys that, we can probably get on the cheap relative to potential production? But it's a top heavy, relatively top heavy position. Let's see, what else did we say was good? Linebacker. So linebacker, you've got Queen and Wagner way up top. They value out in the mid 13s, which is very good. The linebackers are, whatever. And you just got a lot of guys. Zach Cunningham, Frankie Louvu, Blake Cashman, Nicholas Morrow. These are good players. They're solid. You go down a level. You got guys like Jewel. A lot of the names are jumping over one another because we've got a lot of guys overlapped in here. I probably should just pull up the table and see. You got guys like a Jordan Hicks, Kent Murray, Dodson. These are guys that are, solid enough football players, and you can use them to fill out what is, probably the least impactful part of the defense. And do that. Interior defensive line, that was another position that was good, right? So we got our IDL. So if we look up at our chart here, what do we got? We got Chris Jones up there, Christian Wilkins, Leonard Williams, free agent, Autry, Calais Campbell, Fletcher Cox, DJ Reader. Those are our veteran solid guys, on that 13 million range. Michael Pierce, he falls into that veteran range. Now that's a big drop there. So you look at it, it's a nice group of players up top. Maybe it's not the sexiest group of names, to where you get to the point where you're like, these guys are like, really killing it and all that. But a lot of very capable, good players. I have no idea what a player like a Leonard Williams is going to fetch as a free agent. I'd have to think about it. But my guess is, relative to the production you can get from him, I think it might be low. Now, he may re-sign with Seattle, and Seattle will probably pay through the nose for him because he's got a lot of leverage there. But that's an example of like a solid player that you get into that third contract. Their value decreases a lot of times when you get to that and you get a good player on a third contract. Just some other positions, just pull them up. Like center, this is terrible. Lloyd Cushenberry I have as your number one, and then there's like nobody. That's just a disaster position. So you're going to be looking at the draft really there, unless there's somebody who's been hurt. I don't care about fullbacks, guards. Zeitler, he's older. Van Roten, he's a backup player. He's getting, I'm sure, participation more than anything else. Simpson, Runyon, Glasgow is in there. These guys are, they're fill-in kind of player levels that you see there at guard. Let's look up left tackle, right tackle. Our salaries are getting pretty close there, so it's not a big deal. So you got Tyron Smith, who we have as the most valuable at about $16.5 million. Nobody's going to touch him. It's going to be Dallas or bust for him. You got to worry about injuries with him. He's been in Dallas forever. I can't imagine him really even leaving there. Onwenu, he's an interesting guy because he can, I have him listed as a tackle, but he can play tackle, he can play guard. He may be the best guard available. Excuse me. If George Fant, he's a backup, kind of guy, spot starter. He's a good veteran swing tackle to have that you can probably get for a couple of million. So if he plays a lot like he has this year, you're probably getting about $10 million out of him, which is when you think about it, your top tackles are paid around 20, so it's not awful. But that just gives you an idea. Jonah Williams, it might be an interesting person. Storm Norton, I mean, he just bounces around all the time. So I mean, it's just not a good group. You have Trent Brown. That's a potential player. Is his heart in football? Who knows? Can he stay healthy? Who knows? So that's a bad group. Is there anyone else I missed here? Quarterback, left tackle, running back. Oh, I'll do safety and wide receiver too. I forgot about them. Safety. I'm sorry, running back. So you got Derrick Henry. That's at 9-9. Tony Pollard I have at 8-9. Saquon Barkley I have at 7. Josh Jacobs I have at 6-6. Zach Moss, his number would be higher. If he didn't have the little, that Taylor come back. I mean, these are names. Would you really pay a lot for any of these guys? No. And their production probably decreases each and every year. So you can get a name at running back. The Jets got a name with Dalvin Cook, so I'll just give you that as a possibility. All right, so let's take a look at safety. Safety, our little chart here. We got Winfield, Gibson. I can't even see what that is. That my contacts are driving me nuts now. If you're watching on video, you're seeing the squinting. Blackman, McKinney. You've got 5 good guys there. Let me pull up a little chart there. Oh, Geno Stone. Okay. You got a Rudy Ford, Jordan Whitehead, from the Jets, who's had a nice year. Cameron Curl, Jordan Fuller. So, I mean, there's solid players as you go down that list where you can find guys that you can plug into probably like a good defense or someone where you need some, to get some cost savings, but you can get somebody you can start, and go from there. Tight end. Tight ends always kind of get overpaid. You got Dalton Schultz around 9. I doubt he's going to get paid that. Hunter Henry around 8. That's probably not happening. Noah Fant 6. Gerald Everett, Adam Troutman. I mean, this is a nothing group as you get down there. So this is one of these years where that one's not going to be anything. And finally, we got wide receiver. So let's pull this up because this is going to depend on who does and doesn't get franchise tagged. So you've got Michael Pittman, who is a real intriguing free agent. I've said this before, and maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. Pittman to me is a number 1 on a team that has a suspect group, as my kids would say, sus, group of wide receivers. When he goes on to a team that, you're expecting more out of the passing offense, I don't know if he would fill that number 1 role maybe the way that you think he would. But I guess that's something you would see. It's been more miss in free agency when we talk about signing players. But, I think that would be a real interesting one if Indianapolis was to let him go. Now, if Indianapolis was to let him go, I mean, that would be a pretty bad sign for Indy. I mean, they have all that cap room we talked about. It's like, if you're not going to re-sign him, like, who are you re-signing at that point? But, I think that's an interesting one. If he can get through the franchise process. Mike Evans, he's probably going to be a Jet if the Jets don't get Devontae Adams. I think the Jets need to have exploratory talks with the Raiders by February, either get the deal done or don't get it done, and then you go into get Evans after that. I'm not as worried about Evans going into the cold, but I might be a little bit worried about that. It's a different environment that he's played in, but it's not the same as like when you got a dome guy that's going into something completely different. Evans, consistent as could be, he will have games where he just dominates. He'll have other games where maybe not as much going on. But if you have a team like the Jets where you've got a Garrett Wilson on there, it doesn't matter because you've got other guys that can pick up the slack. That's one of the reasons why Tampa, I think, had a very, and still does, can be very effective in that passing game because you have a guy like that and you've got other receivers who are good receivers on the team as well. And it's like a perfect fit. Calvin Ridley is your number 3. That's an intriguing one as well. He's talented. First year back kind of in a while. Can he get even better, or is this the peak of what he did and now we're actually going to decline? Gabe Davis. So Davis is going to come under the question of, is Gabe Davis, and not that Gabe Davis is having monster numbers. Now, watch, he's probably got like 3 touchdowns right now in the game as I'm recording this. But, Gabe Davis is one of these guys where someone is going to say he's a byproduct of the Buffalo Bills. He's a byproduct of Josh Allen. He's a byproduct of playing with Stephon Diggs. He's probably going to get downgraded because of the situation he's coming from. I don't think he's going to get upgraded for it. And I'd probably downgrade him too. Hollywood Brown, I'm not big on Hollywood Brown. I don't know if anyone will be. He's one of these guys that, where I talked about Michael Pittman, Marquise Brown probably fits more as like I almost feel like he's better suited to be like a number 3 deep threat versus anyone that you build anything around. Josh Reynolds, yeah, solid, whatever. Tyler Boyd. You got Odell Beckham way down there. So, now here's the other one. And so here's T. Higgins. Now, this is an injury example. So, Higgins, we have his value at 5'3". Higgins, obviously, if he's healthy, is way up there. He's probably like a 17 value. He's going to be right up there with those top 3 players. So, he becomes an interesting player as well. Just because he's got a lot of upside, assuming that the Bengals let him go. I don't know if the Bengals will or won't. They have the cap room to keep him. But, that'll be an interesting one, to see what they do there. So he would really fit in that higher category. So this is a nice little group at the top if these guys don't get tagged. I don't believe Mike Evans is going to get tagged. But, if these other guys don't get tagged, it's a nice little group of players there, which is not typical, for that position. And I think that's everybody. So that's just kind of like that quick high level overview of free agency and, some of the things that might be there, for, next year when it comes to that. So, all right, let me get into questions here. Man, what has my son done with this? I have no idea. He's got something open, and I don't want to mess it up. It's some game, flight simulator or something. I'll really get in trouble if I somehow mess that up. I was trying to download something on here. Let's see. And it was, whatever it was something really big because it was taking forever. Let me take a look. I'm just going to see if I can open my email on the computer here. This way I just don't have to pull it up on the screen. Just bear with me for 1 minute here. I'll see if I got any podcast questions on email. I definitely got one today. Let me see if there's anything from before. If I can find anything easily from the last week or two, I'll touch on that as well. Okay, so Bo has a question here. I think this is from before. I have to get another beer in a second. Let's see. NFL will not indicate to the teams what the salary cap will be next season. I read this as a disagreement between the NFL and the NFLPA and how to return from COVID cap and how fast they implement the new TV deals into the cap. What happens if the sides can't come to an agreement on how to proceed? Can the NFL decide the salary cap without agreement, or what is the process? Well, that process is basically defined within the collective bargaining agreement. The stuff that goes on kind of on the side between the NFL and the NFLPA, they do little side agreements on stuff. So, like for COVID, we came into these agreements where the NFLPA agreed to suspend like performance-based pay, freeze the rookie pools. The rookie pools were going to drop, but get the rookie pools freezed, and they would freeze them even when the cap went up. And kind of in return, they would allow the NFL to, as long as they put that minimum cap in, whatever it was, 180 million or whatever, they agreed then the following year that the cap would be, was it 198, 202, whatever the number was. I don't know. You kind of come to these agreements as to what the cap will be, but the generalized formula for the stuff, that's all spelled out in the CBA. So it really shouldn't be a question of NFLPA agreeing on something. Like, this formula was decided on when they bargained, right? The NFLPA very specifically said, this is the formula that we want to calculate the stuff. And basically it was going to be that this is what we consider revenues, and it's going to be more or less a 50-50 split. I forget what the numbers actually come out to be. If it's 48-52, 49-51, let's just call it 50-50. It's supposed to be that all revenue gets calculated in, not that there's really anything else. So the other things which are, what the heck does the NFL actually, I'm trying to think of their technical phrase that they have for it. I just call them like adjustments, or, I don't know why I'm thinking up downs. That's not really what it is. They have their own word that they use for for different kind of adjustments and stuff like that. But there's stuff that can come into play with that the two sides can agree on. But this really shouldn't be something to where the NFL is like, well, we made this much revenue, so yeah, if we calculate it by the CBA, the salary cap next year should be 270 million, and the NFLPA comes in and says, well, no, I don't like that. I'd rather have the salary cap at 242. Like, what? Like, that wouldn't make any sense. Nor would it really work the other way around, to where the NFL would come in and say, well, we calculated the numbers and we think the salary cap next year is going to be 225, and the PA comes in and goes, well, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah, the salary cap's got to be 250, and the NFL says, sure, why not? So I think if there's a delay, in what they're doing, true up. That's what they always call their things. They're true ups or whatever. I think if there is a delay, I think number one, it might be some stuff that has to do with COVID still, like some of those benefits that the PA gave up and kind of deferred to 2023, 2024, 2025, or, the creation of new pools or whatever it is. Might be going to them and saying, okay, how do you guys want to do this? Like, this is your area. Like, how do you want to work with these numbers? That might be part of it. And the other thing might be that they actually were not certain of certain monies that were going to come in or not come in. There might be some delays with certain things that they just were maybe not 100% certain about. So I think that's probably why they didn't issue their guidance, is that they may have some other things, kind of on hand, and then see, what that would be. All right, let's see. I think this is from Mark. I don't think I answered this one either. Some time ago, you said a team should spend in cash 105% or so of the cap every year. I didn't believe that was sustainable, so I created a spreadsheet to check. What I found was if the salary cap goes up 10% every year, a team can spend 110% on the cap in cash every year. I assume 3-year contracts, players made it all 3 years and eventually settled at about 8% of the cap is proration. 18% unamortized and stays there. Is that basically what you were suggesting? P.S. If that doesn't sound right, I can show my work, but I figured you've already done it. So yeah, that's kind of what it is. When you look at the way the salary cap grows, and really, if you just look at historic trends over the course of the new CBA era, the 2011, really 2013 after. When you start looking at those are kind of the numbers you come up with. So the 105 number that I came up with really was a number that would just try to have some bite to the spending requirements that the Players Association puts in. I forget what they're requiring, 90%, like nobody does that. I think what I did was, going back, I think I calculated the numbers for every year and came up with the fact that the NFL, on average, most teams spend, might have been a little bit less than that, might have been like 103%. And, that, 105%, okay, whatever, 103, we can round that up to 105, and, teams can go there. And again, when you look at kind of what you're talking about here, we're talking about, so our salary cap rises. So our investment in our old contracts relative to the salary cap goes down. And if we structure our contracts right, we keep increasing that cap space. This is the Philadelphia Eagles model that basically is following. You can see that every year, you can spend probably about what you're talking about. I when I was bringing up those numbers, it was more like this should be the minimum threshold for NFL teams. Like, it should not be that you got to spend 90% and we're high-fiving if we're the union. It should be that, okay, this is the league already on average is over the salary cap. Like, how do we make this meaningful to make these guys that are lagging spend up? Well, they should be spending over the salary cap, because the salary cap's an accounting system. It's not a cash system. It's an accounting system. So they should have their cash budgets set, all of them, over the cap if we're talking about a 3-year period. You can't do it if it's on a single year period. But if we're talking about 3-year periods, 4-year periods, absolutely you can. And I think what you're talking about here, especially when you're talking about the rookie cost-controlled contracts that are going to be in there and everything else, absolutely should be able to do that. So I think that is, that's something that they should be looking at. And, in the future, you have a new leader now for the Players Association. It's not hard to look through the numbers. Just the numbers that exist out there right now and say, okay, if on average teams are spending this, why in the world should I be letting a team get away with spending 90% of the cap? Why should I allow any one team to spend 92% of the cap if everybody else is already spending 103? Like, I want to bring spending up. I don't want to give them the ability to dictate their own spending. It's like, what was the purpose of negotiating all that stuff if there's no bite to it? So, yeah. All right. Jason. From Jason, not for Jason. Well, it's for Jason as well. Why would a team not draft a player but sign them as a UDFA? Vikings signed Ivan Pace as a UDFA, gave him a healthy base salary guarantee and $20,000 signing bonus. It was reported locally when signed and basically confirmed early in camp he would make the team. He has been playing well. If they knew he would be good, why not draft him in the 7th round? The year for base minimum in 2026 has got to be less than an RFA tender that'll be required at that time. What am I missing here? All right. So a couple things to this. So let me grab another drink. Then I'll pop back down here. So just give me 1 second. I'm going to pause this and then I'll be back. All right. I'm back here. My daughter was asking if she could come and talk about Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift. Yeah, she's very big fans of the Chiefs. Just Mahomes and Mahomes and Kelce and Taylor Swift. All right. Anyway, so going back to the question that was here. So first of all, when a player doesn't draft a player, that they like the player, he's going to make the team, yada, 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 yada. A lot of times that's just lip service that's given by the team. All right. If they didn't draft him, it means they liked somebody better than him. It means they like a lot of guys better than him. when you hear the local reporters or national reporters, whoever, or I don't consider myself a reporter, but someone like me that might say something like that, come out and say that, well, he's going to make the team. Really, what you're looking at is that they gave him a base salary guarantee of $216,000, which matches the salary of a practice squad player. So that tells me two things. Number one, their basic estimation is that they're going to sign him and he's going to make the practice squad. Like, they'll cut him and he'll be on the practice squad. The other thing is that they figured like he's talented enough to where at least another team is going to give him tryouts on the practice squad. And that salary is offset, like if he signs with another team or if he signs back with your own team. So if he has a $216K guarantee and he stays on your practice squad the whole year or another team's practice squad the whole year, you get your $216,000 back. So you don't owe it to him. You just owe him that $20,000 signing bonus. So really, that's all it says, is that they're willing to say, hey, listen, we will guarantee you a practice squad salary. It's not 100% guaranteeing you a practice squad spot, but it's a practice squad salary. But their expectation is you're going to be on somebody's practice squad at the very least for the most of the year. And then that's what they do. But, when you look at, even that guarantee is higher than a seventh rounder's guarantee, right? But, it just means that whomever they picked in the seventh round, they liked better, regardless of how the guy's playing and whatever they want to tell you now, or they may have even said at the time. They liked somebody else better. If when you see the crazy stuff like, we had a fourth round grade on that guy, we had a fifth round grade on him, and that's why we gave him this big guarantee, and we really really liked him. It's like, okay, you had that, but that means you liked your fifth rounder better than him, your sixth, and your seventh. So that tells me that you thought your sixth round player also was a fifth round talent. You thought your seventh round player was also a fifth round talent. Now this undrafted guy is also a fifth round talent. So you never, there's usually always going to be a scout that likes a guy better than someone else. But when you hear those things, most of the time it's just saying stuff for the sake of saying stuff. I mean, it's just, I think those kind of things are just, it is what it is. The other thing that you mentioned here is about the RFA tender. So they changed the rules in the current CBA. So the tenders are a little bit different. Before, you could get more if you were undrafted. And so at that point, it was, advantageous to be undrafted probably after the third or fourth round because you had access to those higher tenders. Now, excuse me, and I forget off the top of my head what the rules are for it, but you do have access to bigger tenders, that are there if you're a draft pick. So, it probably ends up being the same price either way. The only difference would be is if you were talking about someone who was like a quarterback, because that's the only position most likely, that's going to get a first round tender, because I don't think there's a way to get a first round tender. So that would be that. All right, let me see. I don't think there's any more emails, but that looks like I don't know what he's got on this thing. All right, there we go. No, I don't think I have any more. I don't think I have any more. Sorry if I missed anything from a while ago. I do see I have a judge's invite here from Tulane. So let me just mention that real quick. I don't know if I'm going to get to go this year. I love that competition. I really do. I enjoy going. I enjoy getting to see all the judges who are there, catching up with people. And I like interacting with all the students who really want to work in the NFL. If you're a law student, I highly recommend this competition. If you want to work in the NFL, it's very worthwhile. There's a lot of people that just do the competition because they like doing competitions. That's different. But for the people who really want to work in the NFL, I love meeting with them, giving them feedback and talking with them and everything else. I just don't know if it's going to work out in my schedule. I got to really look into it. But I'm hoping to go. But if you... if you are a law student and you have not looked into it, and maybe it's too late, but I would highly recommend, you go to your school and, you discuss with them the possibility of, going to that competition if it's not too late. It might be too late because I think they do a screening now on it. But yeah, it's a terrific competition. Let's repost this, but I don't expect much on that. So we'll do those questions in a second. So, here we go. Here's the Dan Marino video. My goodness. You could put together a highlight video probably against the Jets that would get him in the Hall of Fame. This guy was just so good. This came. I don't know. I saw it on my timeline. Kids today just don't understand. They're showing these Dan Marino clips. As a little kid, you just knew this guy was so ridiculously special. Probably wrong era, maybe the wrong team. Couldn't get it going in the playoffs. Some of that was probably the team that he was on. Marino was so good. I don't think there's a better quarterback in terms of just being able to drop back, throw the ball, avoid a pass rush. I don't think there's anyone better than Marino. I don't think there ever will be. There's guys who are better overall players, crunch time, whatever, have that second, third, fourth gear that they're able to drop into. Man, maybe this is a highlight film against the Jets. Just ridiculous the way this guy played. Just ridiculous. If this team had even something remotely resembling a defense, they would have. They at some point they would have beaten an NFC team. I was really young the year that they beat the Bears, and I only watched maybe the first quarter of that game. I remember being allowed to stay up to watch the beginning of that game, and it was so exciting. It felt like a Super Bowl because it was like the great Dan Marino versus this great Chicago Bears defense. And I remember getting up the next morning, and I think we were, I'm pretty sure at the time we were in between homes. We were staying with my grandparents at the time. We were moving, and the home we were moving to was not ready yet. And I can still remember waking up that next morning and finding out that the Dolphins won. And it was shocking. And to this day, I will say that we were probably robbed of a really meaningful Super Bowl when the Dolphins kind of choked in the playoffs, and the Patriots ended up going, and we got the the New England, the Patriots and we, or whatever that song was, that was their version of their answer to the Super Bowl shuffle. You were robbed of the real Super Bowl, because you would have had the team that beat Chicago, playing against them. And it was a team that matched up well with them. Why? Because of this guy, because of Marino. If you're just watching, if you're seeing these clips, on there, if you're following along with YouTube, just absolutely amazing. I've never met Marino, never seen him. I've met Elway before, seen Elway. I didn't really meet him. Only thing I remember was my brother-in-law met Dan Marino once for something, and all I remember was a picture, and I'm like, man, his hands are giant. That was the one thing I took away from the picture, was he looked like he had giant hands, and man, that guy was a special quarterback. There's nobody like him right now in the NFL. Really isn't. He was just so far and above everybody else. It was just amazing. All right, let's take a look at questions here. All right, got our Twitter questions. Okay. This is from Crovid19. Are the financial benefits of having games exclusively on Peacock enough to justify the ill will it's causing? So I'm not really following along with any of the stuff. I'm assuming it's on in the local markets. So I think as long as something is on the local markets, I don't think you'll get the overriding complaints that just become like a nightmare kind of scenario for the NFL. At least I don't think you will. Anything is possible with it. I don't like that as kind of a money grab for the league, but you've got to see that the way that stuff is going right now, people are moving away from cable. That's just the way that things are going. And if you want to maintain the fact that you are getting ridiculous amounts of money in your television contracts, you have to be open to the possibility of putting your major stuff on Amazon, Netflix, Peacock, YouTube, whatever it might be. You need to bring those people to the table when it comes to bidding. I don't care what sports package it is. I don't care if it's the NFL. I don't care if it's the NBA. I don't care if it's professional wrestling. If you want to be able to keep your revenue streams growing as cable dries up, you need to be able to go to these different streaming services. And in some ways, it's actually kind of funny because, we talk about, well, the cable companies charge too much and you got to cut the cord. And like, I don't want to spend all this money on cable anymore. And then at the end of the day, you end up spending, $20 a month on Netflix, $20 a month on Hulu, $20 a month on Amazon. I don't know if these are the prices of stuff, but, by the time you get done with it and your internet bill, you're probably spending just as much as on cable, to get your high-speed internet and 8 million different streaming packages, because the streaming right now is not very streamlined. We've still got, a lot of these different fragments out there, that you're trying to bring in. But from the NFL's perspective, I think they're looking at, their Thursday deal with Amazon, the packages that the games they still keep on NFL Network, which are kind of buried in there, to be honest. Those kind of games, the way that they keep them in there, this wild card game that's going to be on Peacock, these different things. This is all trial runs for them. This is all trial runs to see, okay, what kind of engagement are these platforms getting? What kind of negative engagement are we getting as a league by putting these games on there? So I think that it's a necessary evil for the NFL. We don't have Peacock. At least I don't think we do. I'm pretty sure we don't. I guess never say never. So unless it's on a free tier, and maybe that game will be on some free tier, because maybe Peacock is almost going to use that as like a for this year, maybe for them that's a promotional vehicle to try to get people to sign up, to their service. But I think if you look at the long term for the NFL, I think it's probably worthwhile. Short term, it's probably not. But I think long term, it probably is. Okay. Bland tweets. Why are the Jets screwing around on Bryce Huff? Could he get a tag, or they just decided McDonald is his replacement when he walks? So I think when they drafted McDonald, that was very clear that that he was going to be the replacement for Huff. I think that's an absolute certainty. They use Huff 35-40% of the time. I know stuff has gone up a little bit. Maybe he gets up to 50%. McDonald was considered raw talent, so he would fit into that same role, right? That even though he's a first-round pick, raw, next year, kind of situational guy, maybe more after that, that you would see more upside in him. But I think that was what the Jets were seeing there. plans change. Things change in the NFL, right? When the Jets drafted Kyle Wilson years and years and years ago as a cornerback, that was very clear that was to be someone that was either playing against, not playing against, but he was coming in the year. I think the Jets traded for Antonio Cromartie, so it was like, okay, we're going to bring in Cromartie for a year, and then he's going to go, and Kyle Wilson's going to be our guy. I don't think that was ever a replacement for Darrelle Revis. Maybe it was going to give you a little leverage in contract talks or whatever. Obviously, Kyle Wilson never developed at all, and very quickly they decided that it was time to go. Oh, wow. The site was referenced during the Chargers game. I'm not watching the game, so I just found out. That is really cool. I just got an email from someone about that, and I'll have to reply back to them in a minute. That's awesome. I had no idea that the site was going to get referenced to that. I would have actually watched instead of recording this. That's hilarious. Anyway, back to Huff. So while the Jets may have thought something, I think, even though McDonald might have had a sack the other day or a half a sack or something like that, I mean, I think he's a lot rawer than they thought. And Huff has been incredibly effective. Now, I don't know what's going to happen when teams get a little bit more used to the fact that Huff lines up like really, really wide, and maybe there's some ways to kind of play against that, no matter how fast he might be, when he gets off the line. But, the thing is, it sounds like Jacob is making his way down. Yes, Jacob.
What are you doing?
Finishing up podcast.
How long is it?
Give me another 20 minutes.
What?
Give me another 20 minutes.
Can I stay down for 20 minutes?
Sure, you want to come downstairs? Sure. All right, so we're having guest appearance from Jacob, which means he's going to bug me constantly to get on his video games on the computer here in a minute. So anyway, when it comes to Huff, plans change, right? So I think he absolutely could get a tag. Would it be a tag to trade him? It might be. But they have to decide on that. In terms of screwing around on him, at this point in time, why don't you sit there, Jake? All right, just don't turn the phone up too much. See, this is the fun we get to deal with here. In terms of screwing around with him, if I'm Bryce Huff, I'm not signing a contract right now. Why would I sign a contract with 2 weeks left in the season, 3 weeks left in the season? I'm not that worried about an injury. You want to come and say hello? No? You don't want to come on? I have a camera going. You want to say hi? You sure? All right. Doesn't want to say hi. So at this point, I wouldn't talk about it as being a screw around. Because you shouldn't be taking a deal. Like, all right, Cairo Santos signed an extension, whatever, he's a kicker. I get it, why he would do that. The couple of other guys that signed extensions, Austin Jackson, Delpit on the Browns. And I know he got hurt, so, I mean, that ended up working out pretty well for him. But, there's very limited reason to be signing a deal this late in the process. You should be not doing that. You should be, if you're a player, get to free agency. Don't sign a deal with 2 weeks left in the season unless the team is just going to blow you away with an offer. Jets probably don't have a lot of cap room right at the moment. They have some, to do something, but I think that's really the reason why. So I wouldn't be, if you're a big Bryce Huff person, I wouldn't be too worried about it. But you wait to see where things stand in February, March. I think before you get too worried about it. All right. Hopefully we're not picking up too much of Jacob's noise here. Beach Mora, the Saints. So I talked about them before. It's a bad situation. You have to you have to deal with the fact that you can't change your roster. You're basically stuck with this group. You may be able to add a player or two. You do that all the time, and you lose other players. Off the top of my head, I don't really know what their free agent situation is like. I don't think it's bad this year, but if you're not a good football team, you should be moving on, not moving forward with the same group. And you're in a position where you have to move forward with them and do things with the contracts where you might have to move forward with them for 2 years. And that's the thing when people go like, well, you keep saying it's doom and gloom for the Saints, but every year they're signing people. Every year they get worse. They don't get better. They get worse. So I don't know, like what would make you think that what they're doing is good, that what they're doing is optimal, because it's not. Tito, how do you feel about a second wave of inflation? Hopefully there won't be one. We've had enough price increases. Jake, what needs to happen for a consistent backup like Flacco, Minshew, Browning to get a starting gig for 2024? Some combination of desperation and proven competency. So I don't see any of those guys getting a starting job next year. Flacco, to me, is going to get a job as a backup, maybe in Cleveland. Unless they think that's going to be quarterback controversy, in which case maybe they won't do that. Minshew, I mean, Minshew's too erratic. Browning, no. You'd have to look at these teams that, maybe like the Raiders, that just aren't going to be in a position to draft a quarterback and they need to throw somebody out there. But I don't know. Maybe if I had to rate those, I'd say maybe you'd go with a Minshew. I think Flacco, and I'm glad for Flacco. I gave Flacco a lot of crap through the years for his contracts, which justifiably so. They took the Ravens to the woodshed, on a couple of those deals, and subsequently to the Broncos. But he's a solid player. It's not like he's not a solid player. He was never the best player in the league, and he was paid to be the best player in the league. But or paid close to it. But he was great. Hey, if you were somebody who was a quarterback, he was great for the position because he raised the salaries for everybody. But I'm glad if he still wants to play football and he can still be somewhat effective, and he was fine with the Jets. It's a flawed team. He was fine with them. That's all well and good. I think if you are dealing with a team like Joe Flacco, you are dealing with a situation where, maybe you're at the point where you're looking at guys and you're saying, okay, there are veteran quarterbacks that are staying in shape. We're telling them stay in shape. We'll bring them onto the practice squad halfway through the season if we're a competitive football team, and then let them decide from there, what they want to do. So, I kind of think that's more of a Flacco role in the future. And it's probably good for him too. Let him go to a football team that competes. Let him get on a contract that gets him money for, being a playoff contender. And, to be honest, it's probably beneficial when the team has done all their preparation for other people, that you're coming in midway through the season and giving a completely different look. The Browns are a completely different look with Joe Flacco than they are with, PJ Walker or who's the other kid they had playing? I don't know. I can't think of the name. Just completely different. So, I think that's more the role on that is, having guys that are veterans that maybe could be staying ready, that you just try to catch lightning in a bottle. The Jets probably should have brought Flacco back this year. They didn't. I still don't know if they would have been any better, but it would have given them a little bit more hope, I think. Andy, is it possible for NFL teams to use deferred money in contracts? And if so, how would it be treated for salary cap purposes? So you can. Nobody really does it. So if you defer money, basically they use a present value calculation. There were a couple of times in the past, like way, way, way past, where that was done. I think it could be done if there were signing bonus payments that were like way late. You're allowed to go, I think, a year out from when the extension kicks in. I think that's what it is. And then they're just counted in full. But the same goes with salary. I think the last player to take a deferred salary, I feel like was Brett Favre with Minnesota. And I don't even remember the last one to take a signing bonus number where the proration was impacted by the fact that it was a number that was deferred to where they used a present value calculation. Ian would know. Off the top of my head, I'm not even sure. Michael Becker, what are the salary cap implications for the Chiefs if Kelsey retires after this year, next year? Is that something they're able to begin planning for? Let me look his numbers up. But he's got a very affordable contract. I mean, there's nothing they're going to have to worry about cap-wise if he retires. So it's going to be the same as if he's cut, pre-June 1. So next year it would only be 5 dead. So you'd be looking at 10-4 saved. The following year would be 2-5 dead, 17-2-5 saved. Now he may have, I don't recall, I don't see it in the notes here, but I know some of their contracts I feel like have this, and maybe he had this earlier on. I feel like he's got one of these weird deals that has like these late season, like a guarantee kicks in March, so there may have to be some timing involved. But yeah, they could, it's not a problem for them salary cap wise. Proud Black Matt, what kind of contract does Mayfield get? Apologies if you've already covered this. First round pedigree still carries weight. I don't think his first round pedigree carries much weight anymore. He's been with enough teams, had enough failures to where I don't think teams look at him and say, okay, this is Baker Mayfield, first round draft pick. I think they look at him right now and say, he's Baker Mayfield and there's some potential there to be a starting quarterback. I don't know what he'll get. I mean, if we assume he doesn't get franchise tagged, he's still young. So the question is, if he's going to go back to Tampa, and I know they don't have that investment in him, that draft investment, but the Giants front office didn't have a draft investment in Daniel Jones either, and Daniel Jones got 40. So, I'm thinking Buccaneers would go 40-ish on that. Now, I think that you could also look at it from a different perspective, and I think you could look at this and say, all right, if we're going to play a little bit hardball here, we're going to be a little smart about it. Would Baker Mayfield get $40 million from another team in the NFL? My answer to that is no, he would not. So I would try and approach it more like a Geno Smith situation. And I know Geno Smith's much older than Baker Mayfield. But I would do that, rather than looking at the $40 million a year, I would look at something that's more around 30 with all kinds of incentives that can get it to 40. I would do the same with Jared Goff. When you're Detroit, if you're looking to move forward there too. But, I don't know. I'm going to guess franchise tag at this point. I'm assuming that's open. I don't think he has a no tag. I'd have to look through my notes to see. But, I guess that's probably what'll happen. And Bob, a Saints cap situation if they cut Carr and some other players. Plus, would you get pretty long-term contract next year? So Carr, I talked about the Saints before. There's no value in cutting Carr. There's no value in really cutting anybody. I don't think that's really a question for them. Brock Purdy, you're talking about after next year, right? This is only his second year. Yeah. So he's not extension eligible till 2024. So yeah, I would do that. I would, based on the way that he's played, end of last year, played most of this year, I would extend him after next season as long as things go the same because, unless, now, if you win a Super Bowl, we're obviously having a different conversation. But, it's hard to win a Super Bowl. So let's go with the assumption San Francisco is not winning a Super Bowl this year. If you don't get to that Super Bowl level and you're Brock Purdy, that draft status works against you. and the fact that you haven't made anything works against you. I don't know who represents him. Don't. I have no idea. I don't know if he's already switched agencies to a big one. I would imagine that, usually when you're a late pick like that, you're a small agency, and then everybody comes out to get you when you jump up from there. But, if you're still a small agency, that agency is looking to get you a deal right away. Because they want to make sure that they're getting paid, right? So, if I'm them, I think that I would look to extend him that year. He would have, there would be some financial benefits to it for San Francisco, simply because he, would have that low salary. They'd have some time to prorate that money out. And again, the question kind of becomes, if you're a team, if you don't see a scenario where you're not going to extend the player, like I'll use the Bears as an example. In my mind, I can have a million questions about Justin Fields. So I don't see any purpose in extending Justin Fields right now, even though he's going to want it after this year, because I control those rights through an option year, through a franchise 1, through a franchise 2. And at the moment, I kind of want to have that lifeline, right? I want to have that emergency red button that I can push that says, no more Justin Fields. I want to. So if that's my situation, I don't want to extend the player. Looking at Purdy and the way that he plays in this offense, you've just signed long-term extensions with your general manager and your head coach. He's going to play within this system. I personally don't believe the game manager label is right for him at this point. System, maybe everybody's in a system, but he's going to be in this system for a while. If someone is going to catch up with him, it's going to happen next year anyway before he's extension eligible. I think you take that all into account and say, if you're San Francisco, what scenario is there where you do not extend him? I personally don't think you can come up with one. So, at that point, yeah, you extend him because things are only going to get worse if you wait longer. So I think that's just kind of what you have to do. Oh, I just got another email here. All right, let me jump to the email question, then I'll go back to Twitter here with Brian's question. This is from Max. I'm sure you're also the opinion the Bears should take a quarterback with the first pick, likely be number 1 or 2 versus Carolina. But what do you believe they should do with Justin Fields? As a Bears fan, the second, third round pick he's likely returned doesn't seem worth it to me. I'd like to see them keep Fields, draft 1, and then spend next season figuring out which guy they think they should move forward with. Do you think my idea is crazy? No. I think that your idea is perfect. I kind of mentioned that before. I would do that. I do think that at this point, Justin Fields' trade value is a 2. I think that it could escalate to a 1. Maybe it would even be a 3 that could escalate to a 2. Like a real easy escalation to a 2. Definite escalation to a 1, depending on the timing of what you did. I think that's what you could do there. But no, I would be perfectly fine with drafting the quarterback. At the worst, you let him sit for a year? And you give Justin Fields another year. I don't think Justin Fields has done enough to warrant an extension. And I don't think Justin Fields has done enough to say, okay, we don't need to have Justin Fields anymore. If you opt to go in that direction because you don't believe you can develop 2 quarterbacks, whatever, that's general manager, head coach, that's their opinion, that's their perspective on it. They're guys that are in that room. I'm not. My opinion is you're a professional athlete. You should be able to deal with competition. Whatever. If you can't, you can't. So I'm not taking that into account for myself. But my opinion is you can have both guys there, and I think that long term for the Bears that makes the most sense, because if you never play the rookie because Justin Fields is awesome, that rookie's going to get you a number 1, probably a 1+, because you already paid his contract. And then you go in there and you pay Justin Fields. But if not, let him play that 4th year. He's still cheap. Give him an opportunity to start. Let him start. If he starts and he plays great, thumbs up. Extend him. If he doesn't, the team still ends up 3, 4, 5, 6 wins. You have somebody else that you can turn to. So, I think that is absolutely 100% the way that I would approach it. I personally, and I'm a big believer in getting that draft capital and everything else, but given the position that it is, and this I probably would have said the same thing with Josh Rosen. But let's say that I could get a second round pick for Justin Fields next year. And maybe something to where, the next year it could jump to a 1 and I would give them back a 2. My own opinion is the position itself is so valuable. I would rather chance completely losing that draft pick, and he'd be going to his 4th year, so it'd be completely losing it, because if he busts, you're not going to franchise tag him, try and trade him. I'd be open to completely losing that draft pick, because I don't think he's been bad enough to where you would say with 100% certainty he's not a solution for me at quarterback. So, I think that is what I would say, is that I think the right route is for them to stick with Justin Fields, and also having a rookie on the team. And happy holidays to you as well. Let's see. Hey, Jacob. Jake, you want to get me another beer? I'll show you which one it is. Look at this. So now we've got some butler service here. So it's one of these. This is the last. There's probably one more of these left. It says 2 Xmas on it. If you can find it. All right, so let's go back to the Twitter questions. Brian here. I don't think I'll get anything else to email. Where's Bill Belichick next season? Can Tom Brady get him a job in Las Vegas? Does he get poached by LA, or does he get one last go in New England? So I think it's time to move on in New England. I think it's time for both of them to move on. I think New England needs to turn the page. I think Belichick needs to turn the page. Belichick is getting that knock on him that he is not capable of winning without Tom Brady, and that is not going to change next year. Even if they draft a quarterback, it's going to take some time. So I think that for both sides, it's probably best for them to make a split. I don't think he would want to go to the Raiders. I don't think the structure of that team makes any sense. I think Belichick, I think the Chargers make some sense for the stuff that I mentioned. If, they make some of those moves, he can do stuff on defense. Oh, there's one that's there, Jake. Just take one more look.
Where is it?
Look on the bottom shelf. On the door. In the
In the drawer?
No, the door.
On top of it?
No, on the bottom of the door. The fridge. All right. I don't think my little butler service is going to work. I know we have the beer fridge in the garage. I'm not sending them there, but I know there's one that's left in the regular refrigerator upstairs. See, this is why I need the beer fridge downstairs. Anyway, just looking at, other teams that would make sense for Belichick, that would possibly open up. I mean, it's the Chargers. I'm just looking at these teams here and seeing what's going to open, not going to open. It's the Chargers that probably make the most sense, only because of the quarterback. So I would think if you're Bill, if you have Belichick there, you're going to keep Keenan Allen at that point. You're going to sign him to an extension, defer those cap numbers out. Work with him. Thank you, Jacob. Work with him a little bit. You're probably trading one of those defenders, even though, he can do a lot with them. He's going to trade one of those guys. Thanks, Jake. Want to say hi? No. Still no hi. What? Okay, I'm almost done. Um, you know, and you just assume that he can go in there, keep one of those defenders, whether it's Mac or Bosa, or maybe get both of them to take pay cuts. Go in there and sign a bunch of free agents, get good on that one side of the ball. And, with Keenan, maybe he goes in there and maybe he finds a way to make a trade for, man, I can't imagine the Raiders trading to the Chargers, a Devontae Adams type. But, bringing in one of those guys that we talked about before, the Pittmans, the Mike Evans, whatever. But yeah, to me, it's the only spot that makes sense. Like, I don't know why he would go to a rebuilding job. Like, it wouldn't make any sense to me to go to that. But I don't think it makes any sense to remain in New England because it's a rebuilding job. He failed at this last rebuilding job, and I think it becomes damaging to a legacy to have all the questions about how can I be without Brady, because I didn't do great with the Browns and the Ravens. Like, I was okay at times, but nothing special. Why would I? Why would I want to go down that path again? It didn't work with Mac Jones, and just go somewhere else that's a little bit more ready-made. Michael, how much of a dump are the Saints in, and how long would it take to get out? 2026. I mean, they're in a bad spot. Rob, what cap moves can the new Chargers GM make to keep the team competitive? So, I think when you get into it and you look at this, I think basically because the guys don't have a lot of years left, they're all in the last year of their contracts, and I really don't want to use those void years and everything else. I think the basic thing would be I'm extending, on a short-term deal with maybe 2 void years, a player like Khalil Mack. You could save about 17, maybe a little bit less because you're probably giving him a little bit more of a bonus. Joey Bosa, I would trade him. Mike Williams, you're talking about a pay cut. You could save $15 million. That's bringing him down to the minimum. But let's say you'd save half of that. You'd save $8 million or something like that. Lindsley, you're cutting. Lindsley, you're going to save $9 million. Keenan Allen on a cut, you're saving 23.1. But if you do some kind of deal, or even if you just threw void years in there, you could save 17. I'd rather look at some kind of token extension, to do that. Derwin James, you're going to restructure. They probably, I don't know if they should have done that deal, should have not done that deal. But basically it's looking at these big names on the roster and determining what you want to do with them. It's these 5 players. Like they kept all these guys this year. When Bosa is the only one they had to keep, right? His deal was basically, and Mike Williams. I don't remember. Was Lindsley guaranteed? Lindsley was probably guaranteed. He was probably just second year, right? Where's Corey Lindsley? No, he's on IR. Nope, NFI, whatever. It's on one of those reserve lists. Yeah, his salary was guaranteed. They didn't have a choice there either. But with a lot of these guys, it was like they made that option with a couple of them to just say, okay, we're just going to push it all to 2024. So you got a 38.5, a 36.6, a 32.4, 34.7. I mean, these are ridiculous. The amount of players that they have with cap numbers over 30 million, really over 19 million. Derwin James 19.8, Justin Herbert 19.4. That's kind of crazy town when you think about it. So it's doing things with these contracts that bring those numbers way down. But I think everything's got to be an extension. I know you can talk about void years and everything else, but you know, I don't want to defer more dead money on Khalil Mack to 2024. I sure as hell don't want to put more to Joey Bosa to 2024. I mean, how many games has Bosa even played the last 2 years? Bosa's played 9 this year, 5 the year before. He only played 7 in 2018, 12. I mean, it's just, I've said this before with him. He's at the J.J. Watt stage, I think, of his career where, he plays, he's effective, and you're like, oh, man, Joey Bosa's great, he's great, he's great. He gives you 9 games. He gives you 8 games, 7 games. If he happens to give you 17 games, great, but you can't count on that. Mike Williams obviously is not back on this contract, maybe half. So instead of saving 20, you save 10, you save 15. Lindsley is out. Allen, like that just made no sense what they did there. It's like you have to be proactive towards the future, with what you do. And sometimes being proactive is not just saying, well, we'll just restructure you. It's about, getting into those contract decisions and contract squabbles sometimes. Kind of like they did with Eckler. I mean, they did it with him, but, to do the best for the organization. Thomas, greetings, Christmas greetings from Denmark. There's been a lot of talk about Ohtani contract structure in MLB. Is it even possible to do similar contract structure with such a heavy backload in the NFL? Do we have any examples? So you can defer salary, but not like that. You can't, I don't think you can defer it that far out. To where it runs beyond the contract. I don't think anybody would go for that. I don't think it would count towards your cash spending. So when we talk about doing that, I don't think it would work that way. I'd have to go and look to see if there's any logical reason, that a team would do that. So I don't think so. But I actually don't know the answer to that question if there is a firm no on deferring that far out. But I do know you're allowed to defer salary. I don't think you can do annuities and stuff like the USFL used to do. But I don't think you can defer. I'm not sure if you can defer that far out. Most of the time the deferrals are like, instead of paying over 17 weeks, well, now it's, over the 36-week period. Over the 17, maybe would have been over, 34 weeks or something like that. So I don't think so. Wildlife Lover Pod. Impossible to find official rule in the CBA or NFL operatings to practice squad poaching. Recent years, all practice squad players could be poached from the end of the game until Tuesday. In effect, no protection for any practice squad. Then Tuesday, team could protect 4. What is the rule for 2023? I don't think that rule exists anymore with the practice squad protections. I think that was a COVID thing. I might be wrong on that. So basically what happens is that the NFL and the Players Association will agree to these things. They call them side letters. And sometimes you'll see them. Usually it'll be like a Rappaport or Pelissero, occasionally Schefter, but usually it's more the NFL Network guys. Will actually get copies of the memos and put them on Twitter that come in. That basically be some memorandum from the Management Council that will basically be an amendment to the collective bargaining agreement. And it'll actually be in writing, 10 years from now when there's a new CBA. But I think, most of those rules all come out and you've got to search for those little memos if you can find them. So I think they got rid of the protecting 4 players rule. I don't think I remembered reading that. I know nobody has protected a player this year. I don't think anyone protected a player last year. So I think those were COVID rules. In terms of poaching, I think that's written in the CBA. I'm not 100% sure on that. Basically, the rule is that player is free to sign pretty much anywhere unless it's with an opponent. I think the opponent has to be signed within a certain period of time, if it's that. How about those Chiefs? At what point in the offseason will the Chargers once again be predicted to win the AFC West? I think that's going to be a while. I would imagine unless Belichick goes there. So if Belichick goes there, it's going to be in February, or January. So they'll be predicted to win in January. But if Belichick does not go there, I think it'll be a while before the Chargers get that kind of, love. All right, let's see if there's anything else here. I don't think so. I'm going to guess Diggs is having a bad game. 0 chance Diggs is with the Bills next season. Oh, wait. There might be some more questions here. Hold on. I saw some stuff about Diggs in here. Let me go to my profile page. Let me see if I missed anything that was in the podcast questions. Otherwise, maybe some people just tweeted something. Let's see. Okay. So this I definitely didn't see. Maybe I just missed it. Infopocalypse. Will Chris Jones' market be less than Brett Veach's offer? He'll be 30, and although he's still playing well, isn't a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. I don't really have a guesstimate on his contract at the moment. I think the Chiefs will probably offer him a very competitive offer. Unless one of those teams with a lot of cap space, and it would have to be a team like the Bears that think they can probably compete right away. I don't think it shouldn't be Washington, right? Washington just got rid of their top pass rushers. Shouldn't be any of the rebuilding teams. I don't think the Raiders would go down that route again. Certainly the Panthers wouldn't. I think unless it was a team like Chicago, I can't imagine with the age that there's going to be a team that's going to be that crazy bullish, on him. But, I don't think he's going to get the Aaron Jones deal if that's what he's looking for, unless it's of the Devontae Adams style to where you're getting paid, market, on a top defensive tackle would probably be like $24-25 million a year, and you throw in some funny money years to, make it $30 million a year. My guess is he'll be in the low 20s. Someone will give him an offer on like a 3-year deal. But I haven't really given it much thought. That's just more of a quick one there. Connor, I don't think I saw this one either. Will any free agent wide receiver actually hit the market and be worth putting on a playoff quality team? So I guess the questions where you look at that, I would imagine Mike Evans has got to hit, right? They if they can tag him, then you can't tag Mayfield. So, you'd have to extend Mayfield, which I think would kind of be a mistake. And then go and, tag Evans if you could do that. And I even have to see what that tag number would be, on him. I think they restructured his deal. So I don't think it's not a crazy number, is it? Let's see. Mike Evans' cap is 23.68, so to be 120% of that. 28. They're not going to tag him. So Mike Evans, and I think that's definitely a someone who is capable of benefiting a playoff team. I mentioned before, I got the numbers up here. T. Higgins, if he's available, that's a player I think you'd look at. I think you look at a Calvin Ridley. I'm not sure where he fits in the hierarchy of things. I can't imagine, all things considered, that Pittman's going to be available, so I'm going to throw him as not available. And then see. Let's see. Is there anyone else here that I missed? I don't think so. I'll just look on my notifications feed here. Packers offer Jordan Love an extension in the offseason. What do you think would be a good contract to give him? I'd hold him to the contract he's got now and then deal with the franchise tag process. I That's what I would do. Otherwise, I mean, you're probably looking at 40 to 45 million a year. I know he's played really well in the last couple weeks. I don't know if this is even a podcast question. I know he's played pretty well in the the last couple of weeks here, but you did that deal that you did for a reason. And to be honest, if you're Jordan Love, the Packers don't guarantee anything outside of that signing bonus anyway, so are you going to get a bigger guarantee out of it? There's probably more legitimate money that, is out there for you by, waiting and, trying to do a longer term deal with them or somebody else. Let's see. I'm assuming that's a Dan Marino, 6,000 yards, 60 TDs. Probably true. Hard questions out of the gate. I don't even know what that one was from. 0% chance Diggs is on the roster. All right. I think I've covered everything. So, all right. So that'll do it for me. So while I've missed a couple of weeks here, just pulled up the Audacity feed there. Looks like we recorded for about 2.5 hours. So that's pretty good. Jacob is waiting to get on here, even though it's pretty late at night. But I know he took a big nap. So he'll play video games for a little while before he heads to bed. So everybody have a great Christmas. If I'm not online next year for a podcast, have a great New Year's. Hopefully you guys will be doing something pretty exciting. For this year, I will not be doing anything exciting, but I will hopefully be having a couple of these, something at least, next week during New Year's. Maybe we'll do a Q&A on New Year's. Who knows? See how that goes. We'll have the group of people not doing anything, hanging out on X and asking salary cap questions. So everybody have a great time, and I will hopefully talk to you all again next week. And if not, I'll talk to you all again soon.